Hi, it's Maya here with my November reads and receipts. These videos are like my monthly wrap-ups combined with my TBR challenge progress, and timestamps will be in the description to the specific books that I'm going to talk about as always. I set myself a goal in November to read one book of my physical TBR for every week of November because I haven't been making much progress in lowering my TBR count. So my TBR count at the start of the month was 68 books, and let's start with the reads. First in November I read Sad Cypress by Agatha Christie. This is a Poirot mystery and it's an owned physical book, but sadly I don't count the Poirot books for my TBR, so this doesn't lower my TBR count. So in this one, a young woman is murdered and a young heiress is accused and awaiting trial, and Poirot is called to help to prove her innocence. So the first half of the book is like the case. It tells the events that transpired and it ends with the murder, and then the second one is like Poirot going around and finding clues and solving the case. I guessed the murderer correctly early on as we went through the events that happened, and I was completely certain of it when part 1 ended. And I was right, we didn't need Poirot for anything. This one is also special that I don't remember it from the Poirot TV show at all. Often I remember the murderer or at least some characters or some parts of the plot from the TV series, but this one I didn't remember at all from the show, and I gave this one 3 stars. Next from the library I read The Order of the Pure Moon Reflected in Water by Zen Zhou, and this one is a wuxia novella. After a brawl in a coffee house, a young nun joins a group of bandits. And the beginning with the brawl was fun and I enjoyed being introduced to all the characters, but something was missing for me. I was expecting a different vibe maybe. Like I didn't get the feel I do of when I watch wuxia stories, that adventurous and fun but yet emotional feel. But I did enjoy Zen Zhou's writing style as always, and I like the setting which draws from Chinese wuxia and Malaysia during the Malayan emergency. Zhou calls this tropical wuxia. I gave it 3 stars. Then I finished the pick for my week 1 book of my physical TBR, and that one was Magic Bites by Ilona Andrews, which is an urban paranormal fantasy. In this one, a magical mercenary called Kate Daniels tries to solve her mentor's murder, and I picked this one up because I was feeling like an urban fantasy and it was quite short. But I discovered early on that I didn't really care about the mystery at all. That Kate was just starting to unravel or just starting to investigate, and I was like, I don't really care who did it. So I still kept going and finished it, but yeah, I didn't care at all the whole way through. So this was a bit of a miss for me. This one also did have some like dated or offensive stuff that I don't think would be there if the book was published today. Mind you, it's as recent as 2007, so it's not like it's a super old book. But I didn't jot any of that down when I was reading, so I don't remember the specifics. I gave this one 1.5 stars. But reading this brought my TBR down to 67 books. For week 2 from my physical TBR, I chose The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher. This one came out in 2020. I had been planning to pick up books that I had had for a longer amount of time, but I really wanted to read this, and I didn't get to it in October, so I picked this one up. And it is a horror book. It's T. Kingfisher's second horror book of the Twisted Ones. So in this one, a recently divorced woman, Kara, moves to the back room of her uncle's Museum of Oddities and starts working there to help him out. And then a mysterious hole appears in the wall, and she is joined by Simon, who is the barista from the next door cafe, to investigate that hole and what is beyond it. And this one was inspired by The Willows by Algernon Blackwood, which I have read, and I really like the atmosphere of that. But I didn't find this as creepy as the Twisted Ones. Like, I don't think this was scary at all. In both this one and the Twisted Ones, I enjoyed the parts set in a regular world more than the other stuff. Like the beginning did have some creepy elements, even though I wasn't scared for the whole book. The beginning had some creepy promise, but it didn't really ever go up from that, but I did like that setup a lot. It seems I love T. Kingfisher's fairy tale and high fantasy stuff more, but I do enjoy reading her horror too. It was still fun. Like, even though it's horror, it's still a lot of fun, and her writing style is great. In this one, there was a lot of repetition about the character Simon, who had he had different eyes, and almost whenever he looked at something, the eye was mentioned, and it got a little too repetitive to me. But I gave this one 3 stars. It was a fun read, and reading this brings my TBR down to 66 books. Then again from the library I read Elatsoi by Darcy Little Badger, and this is a young adult contemporary fantasy. Ellie's cousin appears to her in a dream to tell her that he has been murdered, and she sets out to investigate using her powers. So Ellie has the power to raise the ghost of the dead, and it's a power that's been passed on through the generations in her Lipan Apache family, and they only use it to raise the ghost of animals, so they don't use it on people. And Ellie actually has a companion, which is a ghost dog. This is set in the US with magical and supernatural elements like vampires, and it actually had a clever take on a specific part of vampire lore that I really enjoyed. I thought it was genius. I also liked that when I at one point guessed what was happening, the characters realized it was revealed to us not like 2 chapters later. So I found that to be a good thing because it was not drawn out, like the characters didn't remain clueless for much longer than the reader did. And I loved the old legends of 6th grade, which were incorporated into the book, especially the coyote one, the coyote story. That one was my favorite. Those stories were like my favorite part, and I gave this book 4 stars. Then I decided to pick up an owned manga. I picked up A Gentle Noble's Vacation Recommendation Volume 1 by Misaki, Momochi and Sando. And this is like a fantasy isekai sort of manga. So the gentle noble of the title is Liesel, and he like mysteriously finds himself in this unknown city, in this unknown world, and hires an adventurer called Gil to show him around. So this is an isekai, so sort of a portal fantasy. So Liesel is from another world and gets transported into this world, but he's not from our world, he's also from a fancy world and is transported into a fancy world that's similar to his own world. But this is actually based on a light novel by Misaki, so I think Momochi actually did the whole manga adaptation, because there are 3 author names here, and it was hard to find information online about who did what, but I think because the original story is by Misaki and Sando did the original character designs, I think Momochi did the whole manga adaptation based on that story and the character designs, but I am not certain. So the characters in this one were okay, they were charismatic and sweet, especially Liesel, and they had interesting character designs, but some scenes felt a bit empty to me, like something was missing, and I think that is because it has been adapted from a light novel. So I think there's some background content there that would make these characters and the world deeper. So this felt a bit surface level at points, and like it was a bit like airy or empty. I did give it 3 stars. I did like reading it, but I will not continue on with it. This is a manga, so it doesn't count on my TBR count. For my own physical book for week 3, I picked up In the Forest of Serre by Patricia A. McKillip, and this is a fairy tale fantasy. So in this one, Serre's prince kills a witch's hen and is expelled to follow a firebird. There's also a princess who leaves to another kingdom to marry a prince she has never met. And then there's a young wizard who has his own motivations, who escorts the princess to this kingdom. And meanwhile, there is a young scribe who is writing down the story of a powerful wizard who was left weak after his last big battle. First, I'd like to say A+ fairy tale elements, like this is very reminiscent of certain Russian fairy tales. Like there is a firebird and there is a witch who lives in a bone cabin who can appear looking multiple ways, and the cabin moves around, not with chicken feet, mind you, but the witch can like pick the cabin up when she's inside it and run away. It also has a lot of other classic fairy tale fare, like forest animals asking for help, and of course princes making magical deals. And the kingdom of Serre is full of strange magic, and it's a very interesting story and very interesting world to follow. It's very beautifully written, like Patricia A. McKillip's writing style usually is very beautiful, and it's also full of surprises, because I loved how the latest complication that arises, I always thought that this will be the focus of the rest of the book, the rest of the plot, and usually it was resolved in like 1 chapter, and then there came a completely new complication, and I really enjoyed that. McKillip's endings are always a bit up to interpretation in some aspects. I think this was my favorite book of the month, and possibly my favorite McKillip that I've read so far. I gave this one 4.5 stars, and reading it brought my TBR count down to 65 books. And the final book that I read in November was Talviyön lohikärmeet, or Dragons of Winter Night by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman, the second book in the Dragonlance Chronicles. This is an owned physical book, but it's a reread, and it's a high fantasy from the 80s. In this one, the adventures of the companions from the first book continue, and this time they are split into two groups for most of the book. This one had a lot more coherent plot structure than the first. It was focused on the search for the dragon orbs that can control dragons, and since the attacking armies have dragons, that's very much needed. But sadly, because they were split into two groups, there's an interesting group and a more boring group to read about. Like, one group gets Stannis, Raistlin and Caramon, and the other one gets, like, the most interesting characters that it gets are Laurana and Vasselhoff. Like, I do like them just fine, but it's not a fair deal. And while there was like a more boring group to read about, also in this book a lot more goes wrong. Like, the book is a lot darker, so it's not as fun to read. There were, of course, again, some aspects that I had forgotten completely. In the first one, it was like the unicorn and the centaurs and the Pegasi, those chapters. And in this one, it was the gnomes. Like, when I started reading it, I started remembering stuff, but I hadn't remembered there being gnomes at all. And I did read the Finnish edition, and I can read the next one again as an English ebooks, which I'm glad about, because this was a lot slower read in Finnish physical format. The font isn't that great, and also the translation feels like very heavy and slow. It's a very slow read. I gave this one 3 stars. So now we're moving on to the receipts, so you might notice that I managed to read a 4th book for the 4th week of November of my TBR. But let's see how I did with my TBR challenges. So did I read a book of my 10 books I want to read in 2020 list? No. But I did read a book of my free read challenge. So I have 2 out of 3 for the Dragonlance Chronicles reread this year. So if I can reread Dragons of Spring Dawning in December, I have finished the challenge. I didn't fulfill the prompts from my TBR chart challenge either this month, and I did haul some books, but I will do a separate birthday book haul, which I will link if it is up before this video, and I will show what I bought there. But I will show you a bit of an unhaul. So since I didn't read a 4th book of my TBR like I had planned, I decided to unhaul a couple of books. And this is a pretty popular series, but I have just lost interest in this. I have decided to unhaul Red Seas Under Red Skies and The Republic of Thieves by Scott Lynch, the 2nd and 3rd book in the Gentleman Bastard series. I read the first one, The Lies of Locke Lamora, in 2015, and I liked it, but it hasn't stuck with me at all, and I've just completely lost interest in this series. So I'm gonna get rid of the first book, which I have already read, the second book, which brings my TBR down to 64 books, and the 3rd book, which brings my TBR down to 63 books. So finally we have made our way to the stats. In November I read 8 books. That was 2,441 pages. On average, I read 81 pages a day and took on average 13 days for a book. And my current physical TBR number is 63 books. And since I went under 65, now I can finally order Death's Master by Tanith Lee, which I doubt any of you can still remember. I had set myself a book that I could order once I went under 65 at the beginning of the year, and I only now reached it. So I will order Death's Master. I think I'll actually wait until early next year to order it so that I won't add to the jam-packed Christmas package mail that is going on right now. So I'm just gonna wait a bit to order it. But that was my November reads and receipts. Let me know if you have read any of these books. Let me especially know if you read Dragonlance when you were younger, or if you read it as an adult, and let me know how you feel about it. Do you have any nostalgia about it? But that's all from me for now, and I'll see you in another video.